Welcome back to Firewatch Live. I'm Tom DeSorcy, and once again we have Scott Metzler with us. In our last session, we discussed how leadership can change you and why staying grounded is so important. Today, we're tackling another critical truth. Leadership is messy and confusing. There's no right way to lead, and guiding people through change is often experimental and non-linear. Scott will help us understand how good leaders normalize this unpredictability and make it part of the conversation. If we can predict and name the challenges, we can better support each other through them. Leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about helping people navigate the difficulties that come with change. Scott, it's a pleasure and good to see you again.
Good to see you, Tom.
It's it's there's messy and confusing. We've crossed a lot of paths in these discussions. I didn't expect messy and confusing. Is You don't want to scare people off, but we're sort of getting into the nitty-gritty of this, aren't we?
We're getting right down to it, and so yeah, I would not want to scare anyone off, but I would also want to be really truthful about what this journey of leadership is all about. And so, there are fun things about leadership, there are fulfilling things about leadership, but there are also scary and uncertain things about leadership. And I think it's fair to make that a part of the conversation.
I often over the time we've been doing this, and I guess my mind is coming from again the fire side, the operational side, where the leader is the leader when they need to be. But then again, should they always consider themselves as the leader, not when they're not making leadership decisions? You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. And, one of the things that I try to do for myself and for the people that I help navigate through leadership is to be careful about the language. And so it's easy to talk about being the leader. And certainly there are times when we need people to step up and be that decision maker. But leadership is this sort of team lift. It's a team sport, if you will. And so often the answer lies in not trying to figure out who the leader is, but to figure out who's willing to step into this space of leadership and help make things happen.
I think I've said to you before in these previous sessions that there are times when, and it's certainly not an operational side, but it could be in anything, any event that you're involved in is I don't have to be in charge just as long as someone is. I maybe other people once you get used to being led, you get you expect it.
Right, right. And so, we've talked about this in many ways. We condition people to look to leaders, those formal authority figures, the chief, the captain, the CEO, as people who know the answers. And when we do that, we position ourselves in this sort of false dichotomy where where leadership seems like a coin operated bubblegum machine. And so, when there's a problem, when there's a question, if I'm not the boss or the one in charge, it makes sense for me to, put the coin in and turn the handle and wait for the gumball to come out. And so that looks like bringing every problem, every challenge to the boss so that they can solve it, rather than looking to the boss for help, support, growth, development, so that I can grow into the ability to solve problems for myself.
Have you experienced or met people that expect leadership to be one way and one way only? I mean, you say there's no right way to lead, but are there those that expect there is?
Absolutely. And I was one of those gumball machine leaders for a long time because it feels really good to be the problem solver and the answer distributor. And so, when I position myself at the top of the pyramid and, condition or train other people to come to me for the answer, that feels really good. That's a really nice ego stroke, right? My experience has been the answers are less than they could be. They're less robust. They're less of a match for this, for the challenges that we find ourselves in, when there's just this one person dispensing wisdom. Which is why I like to think about leadership as sort of cooperative. Like there's a space in the middle between you and me, and that's where leadership lives. And so when we each feel free or allowed to or are expected to step into that space of leadership where we can co-create answers together, we often come up with way better solutions.
When we say there's no one right way to lead, does it still mean there might be a wrong way?
Yeah, I think there probably is a wrong way. And so, I think there are many wrong ways, just like there are many right ways. And so it makes me think about, this idea of, implicit leadership theory. And we may have talked about this at one point in our conversations, but basically, one of the things that implicit leadership theory tells us is that everyone has an idea about what good leadership looks like and what it feels like, and how we navigate good leadership. And so if there are 10 of us in the room and we each have our own individual idea of what good leadership is or what it should be, but we don't share those things, then probably 9 of us at any one given time are going to be disappointed in the leadership that we experience. If we make it part of a conversation, if we normalize conversations around good leadership, bad leadership, what I need, how I can contribute, then we have this shared understanding of leadership. We're actually starting to fill that empty space that lives between you and me, where the challenges are. And so, we then sort of co-create this construction of leadership, and come to understand that there are many leadership needs and there are many ways to fill those needs.
This is, I think I've said this before. It's so much like parenting. You know what I mean? Because you've got to demonstrate, I would think, demonstrate a certain leadership, I guess, capability, but you're also demonstrating, and by demonstrating, you're training future leaders. Should you worry about that, or should you consider that when you are the leader?
Absolutely. I don't know that I would worry about it, but it sure should be in the forefront of our minds that, good leadership, good leaders develop good followers, and great leaders develop other great leaders. And so, the behaviors that we demonstrate in a leadership space, those are the behaviors that we're modeling for others. And so, if we talk about distributed leadership and shared leadership, but we only do top down leadership, the lesson is top down leadership is most important. While
That
it's important some of the times, it may not be appropriate all of the time. And so just being aware, being open to having discussions about leadership, being willing for people to ask questions about leadership in a space that's non-punitive, where people don't feel dumb about having questions, and that's leadership behavior right there.
that I was going to say that leans right into the fact that there is no one right way, and it should become, I guess, it should become obvious if you're doing it the right way, so to speak, that you think is right, correct?
Yeah, I think so. And I just fall back to this idea that when things seem confusing, when things seem messy, when there's change that people are having to navigate, when you don't know what to do as a leader, a great next move is to fall back and have a conversation and ask really good questions.
If you're leading through a operation in a fire situation, there's not necessarily a lot of change taking place. This is direction to a common goal. But in the corporate world, if you're a leader, quite often you're dealing with change. And you say that it can be disorienting at best. It's a tough challenge to begin with, but leading people through the change is experimental and non-linear. This I want to know more about.
Right. Yeah. So, one of the things that I have witnessed in my career, and I've done quite a bit myself, when I don't know exactly what the right answer is, boy, it sure is tempting to fake it till you make it. right? It sure is tempting to know exactly how this next step is going to go and where we're going to end up and how great it's going to be once we get there. But we really don't know those things. And so when we pretend that we do, we tend to do great damage to our credibility when things don't turn out the way we say they are. And we do great damage to the trust relationship, right? Because I think everyone at some level knows that change in its very nature is unpredictable. And when we pretend that we know exactly how we're going to get from point A to point B, probably not very many people believe that. And so, one way to instill trust in a team, one way to invite people into this creative space of leadership is to simply say, hey, folks, I have a pretty good idea of what our next steps should be, but I'm not 100% sure what that's going to look like. I'd love it if you could help me figure it out. Right. So, in a very real sense, leadership is this team sport where people are invited into this space to figure out how they can do. Maybe it's just one or two little things to make life better for folks who are navigating this, scary and, perhaps treacherous journey that we're on from, where we are to where we want to be.
Essentially, what you're saying is that the leader is really the guide to get you to where you want to be, correct?
You bet. You bet. Yeah. Sometimes leadership happens from the front of the line. Sometimes the leadership move is line up and follow me. Right. Sometimes the leader's in the middle of the stack. Sometimes the leader is at the end of the line, nudging and looking out for hidden danger and offering words of encouragement. So yeah, leadership looks a lot of different ways, especially when we're engaged in change.
When you say that good leaders will normalize this, make it part of the language, explain that.
Sure. One of the things that was true when I started to sort of have questions about leadership, and my observation is I, kind of travel the country, talking with folks and teams and organizations about what good leadership looks like and how we might exercise it. My observation has been for some reason, people often resist talking about leadership. And, I think there are many reasons for that. One of the reasons I think is because it's just not a normalized part of our conversation. We can have great conversations about ventilation and driving the fire engine, and people love to talk about those things. For some reason, when it comes to leadership, it becomes kind of this no man's land. Maybe it's a tightly guarded secret. Maybe there's some fear involved. Maybe there's some uncertainty that maybe I don't feel very good about what I know about leadership, and I'm just simply doing the best I can. And if you come to me with questions that I don't feel confident answering, maybe a self-preservation move is for me not to engage in that conversation, to put off the so verbal and nonverbal cues that this isn't a safe place for those questions. And so, in a very real sense, one of the best things we can do is open up conversations, create spaces in which leadership conversations are not only allowed, but rewarded.
It seems to be all part of the delivery, does it not? I mean that you're really selling this at some point. You have to be a good salesperson to push the message, do you not?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's accurate. I don't know that I would want to position this as a sales job, but certainly I would want to position myself if I was an authority figure, a formal leader in an organization, to build trust with people who look to me for leadership. One of the ways of building trust is having open and honest conversations. One of the ways to instill trust in that relationship is to be honest about the things that I don't know, the things that I'm not sure of, and maybe the things that I'm a little bit nervous about. Because chances are, if I'm nervous about leadership, there are other people who are nervous about it too. One way we can get past that nervousness is to acknowledge it, to name it, and move forward together.
if I look into the rabbit hole here, I think, are we ever getting into body language at all? Where does
Oh,
that play?
sure. Yeah, I think that's really important, and I think it goes beyond body language. One of the things that big data tells us is that in any message, the spoken words, are only about 7% of the message. The rest of it is body language, tone of voice, facial features. Perhaps it's the sort of physical terrain, right? So the same conversation might land very differently if you and I have it on the tailboard of a fire engine with a cup of coffee in our hands, or whether you formally call me to your office and we have a sit down meeting, across the desk from one another. Those are two very different geographies for us to navigate. And so it's really important, it's critically important that as leaders, big L leaders and small L leaders, that we pay attention to the way that we inhabit space, to the way in which we communicate without our words.
I don't think we've touched on reputation. You know what I mean? That
Oh,
the
I
fact
do.
that you, as a leader, start to build that rapport, that muscle memory that you just all of a sudden you turn it on or turn it off, but you're always in charge. And I think that is something that is it's a trait, if you will, or it's something that it would happen normally or naturally. Am I right in that?
Well, yeah, I think in many situations it does sort of happen organically or naturally. Uh, I really think that needs to be a part of the conversation as well. So, when we talk about normalizing the conversation, when we talk about inviting people to co-create leadership, that might sound to people like we're saying, and so I'm getting rid of the responsibility of being a leader. I'm get like I'm not really responsible or in charge anymore if I'm empowering other people to exercise leadership. When we're authority figures, when you're the chief, the company officer, the bank president, as much as we invite people to co-create leadership and to share in that experience, we have to also remind folks that we are in fact the authority figure. And so when we make a decision collectively, I, as the authority figure, I retain ownership, right? I provide protection, direction, and order. If things go wonky, I'm providing cover for people, right? So that's a function of my authority as a leader. And it's important, of all of the things that we talk about, that too. And then the second thing I'll say is it's critically important to be very clear, crystal clear about who ultimately makes the decision. And so, if we enter into a conversation about, what color the new fire truck should be, it could be that I'm gathering opinions. It could be that I'm gathering data. It could be that I'm asking for advice. But if I'm ultimately the decision maker and you say blue, but I decide red, that shouldn't be a surprise, right? We need to be clear about whether this is a group decision, whether we're going to vote on things, maybe we're going to play rock, paper, scissor, or maybe at the end of the day, I, the decision maker, I'm going to make the decision. We have to be clear about how that's going to happen.
In the process of normalization or making it part of the language, as we've said, you say if we can predict it, we can name it and help each other to navigate it. I'm curious how to do this.
Yeah, you bet. So, as I think about groups navigating change, I think about sort of the so if change produces or triggers feelings of loss in people, right? So we're going to move from here to there. It's going to be a change from what's comfortable to me, what I'm used to. So even if it's a good change, there's probably going to be a sense of loss. And we know that people internalize loss through a grief cycle, right? Sometimes there's shock and denial and anger about the change. Sometimes there's bargaining before we get to acceptance. All of those things that are normal parts of humans navigating change. Well, if we don't have conversations about that, It could be that if I'm stuck in the anger phase of navigating change, I might look like a really bad employee. I might be punished, because I'm not, coming along. I'm not contributing. I might get fired. I might get the reputation as the guy who never wants to, get along or progress or whatever. And all those things might be true. What also might be true is that I'm a normal human being experiencing a normal reaction to navigating change. Without that language, without the naming of the behavior and the understanding of the behavior, it might be easy for people to say, oh, that's just Scott. He's just being Scott. He's never happy. Versus, oh, that's Scott. He's a great employee. He's a fantastic team member. I wonder if he's having trouble navigating change. If we know the name of the behavior, and those behaviors are predictable, we all go through them. Sometimes the navigation takes 5 minutes. Sometimes the navigation takes 5 years. But if we can name those predictable behaviors, then we can step in and be helpful in meaningful ways.
How do we deal with those that lead with the mind already made up style?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, and boy, that sometimes can be common in firehouses. And so, here's a powerful question that I think helps us sort of ground ourselves in that space. And so, if I am leading with my mind already made up, and maybe I'm dressing my mind made up in different clothing that seems like I might be open to other ideas. One question that you might ask me that would be simple, powerful, and sort of frame us in reality would be, hey, Scott, Chief, Captain, would you be open to an alternate interpretation? Would you be open to another idea? Which sort of forces me into this choice point. I'm either yes, open to that, or I'm no, not open to it. Whatever the answer to that question is, now we know where we both stand. So if the answer is yes, I'm open to an alternate interpretation, then we're going to have a really great conversation. If I'm honest and I say, nope, my mind's made up, then you know where I stand and you know which direction we're going. So that's a really powerful question. And I don't mean to, be tricky about it or to weaponize the question. If it's asked with honesty and authenticity, it's a really powerful way for us to set the stage for the very next step.
We have, through this process, these discussions have been brutally honest with the leaders and future leaders. And another comment that you make is that if you're not willing to see people through difficulty, we shouldn't accept this challenge called leadership.
Yeah, yeah. And that gets right down to the heart of the matter, doesn't it? One of the things we know about leadership is that it is about change. So, if nothing is going to change, if our job is to make things the same tomorrow as they were yesterday, then we can operate from our authority. We can manage our way through. Leadership is about seeing the future in a different way and charting a path from where we are today to where we want to be. So we know that when we ask people to go on that journey, it's probably going to be upsetting to some people. It's going to create senses of loss in some people. There's going to be question. There's going to be disorientation, disequilibrium. All of that is a part of getting from where we are to where we want to be. The job of the leader is to be present with the people and to see each other through. And that is darn hard work because everybody's going to come to this change from a different place with different lived experiences. That's going to make some things easier and some things more difficult. And so we've got to be humanly, physically, emotionally present with each of the people that we're leading through this change. And that takes a lot of emotional labor to help see people through. If we're not willing to do that, I would be hard pressed to call people who are unwilling to step into that kind of work leaders.
I'm curious as to when you do a presentation and talk to a group of people. I mean, technically, the demographic, the audience you're speaking to are leaders or those that want to be leaders.
Right.
But what is the reaction when you come out and say, you know something, this may not be for you?
Right. Right. I get all kinds of responses. Um, by and large, overwhelmingly, when we start to speak the truth about leadership, um, whether it's presentation, a guided conversation, some kind of consultation, um, people express thanks. People are grateful for the opportunity to A, hear the truth, and B, be invited to speak their truth. The things that I talk about really aren't secrets. A lot of people either have top of the mind knowledge of what we're talking about, or maybe they don't have the words handy, but they intuitively understand. Yep, leadership is heart work, leadership is gut work, leadership is also brain work. So often we focus on the brain. Leaders are the smartest people in the room. They're the people who have been there before. They know what to do. But at the very bottom of this conversation is the idea that good leadership comes from the heart. Good leadership comes from the gut.
Again, in your experience, when leaders realize and recognize that it's not for them, or perhaps that they need to bail it out, if you will,
Yeah.
is it normally because things are messy and
Mm.
confusing that is the time that they say, "Whoa, this isn't for me"?
Yeah, often it is. Often that's the best or the worst kept secret in leadership. The idea that once you get the promotion, you're not necessarily on easy street. An elevation in rank is almost always, especially if we're doing it right, an invitation to more work, not less work, harder work, not easier work. So sometimes, people sort of, you know, stumble upon the idea that maybe this isn't for me because it's not what I thought it was. This isn't what they told me it was going to be like. And so, boy, am I sure glad I found out now before I tested for promotion or took the new job or whatever. But here's the thing. Here's the other part of the conversation. Just because I choose not to step into a position of greater formal authority, that doesn't mean there's no leadership work for me to do, right? So I'll have gifts and talents that I can share to help ensure that the people who do take those promotions succeed, that our team is better tomorrow than it was yesterday, that our organization is better positioned and equipped to meet the mission than it was last week or last month. That's leadership work as well.
So what you're saying is that just because you step aside or give it up doesn't mean that it's over for you in terms of the position and the work that you need to do. But how does a person, again, that guess begs the question, once you do make that decision, how do you come out on the other side of that?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. And I have seen people come out the other side of that in all various ways. And so the way that we can help people come out the other end of that discovery, I think, is to continue having leadership conversations, right? Continue normalizing the idea that leadership looks and acts lots and lots of different ways. And if we think about it together, we're going to come up with a way for you to exercise leadership that is tailor made for the gifts and talents and skills that you bring.
The leaders that step back from that role must,
Yeah.
that's a learning experience in itself. And I'm sure that there are those that come back from that, I guess, are the resilient ones that will bounce back into the leadership role. Have you seen that before?
I have. And so again, I want to be careful about the language. And so just because I don't accept the promotion or I try for the promotion and don't get it, just because I don't sort of ascend the hierarchy of leadership in a formal way doesn't mean that I'm not a leader, doesn't mean that I can't lead, doesn't mean that I shouldn't lead. And so, that the conversation about leading without authority, leading from the bottom or leading from the middle, that's a great conversation. And the other thing is, just because I'm not ready for the opportunity in front of me right now doesn't mean I'll never be ready for the next opportunity. It might be this opportunity again, it might be a different opportunity later. If I look at not getting promoted or deciding not to accept more authority or more responsibility, if I look at that as a failure, I think I'm missing the picture. And often, a leadership move is to help people reframe failure, right? So just because this particular opportunity isn't right now doesn't mean tomorrow, next week, next year there won't be other opportunities that are just picture perfect for you.
Much less confusing. That concludes today's session of Firewatch Live. Thanks, Scott, for shedding light on that messy and confusing nature of leadership. We hope you're leaving today with a new appreciation for the complexity of leadership and how it's okay not to have all the answers. Next time, we'll discuss the art of leadership resilience. Further to this, how to stay the course when things get tough and unpredictable. We look forward to seeing you then for what promises to be another insightful session. Bye for now.